Hello, I'm Rebecca Flaherty, and this week I have a brand new free trailing floral template for you. I've seen so many of your lovely patterns on Instagram using the first one I made, so I thought it was high time I made another one for free for you and showed you a few different ways to use it. This week we're going to be making this pattern here, and over the next few weeks we'll be tackling 3 more, so you have lots of different ways to use it. You can get the free template from the Pattern Maker's Toolkit over on my website, and the links for everything I'll mention today are in the description. For accessibility, all of my tutorials have fully edited subtitles, and all the chapters are marked out in the description if you want to go ahead and skip to the beginning of the tutorial. This is a more advanced level tutorial, so if you've never made a pattern using the diamond method in Procreate before, then I definitely suggest checking out this video first, as it covers everything in much more detail and at a much slower pace. I also have lots of beginner-friendly pattern tutorials on my channel too, which will help you get better acquainted with the way I make pattern repeats in Procreate. But if you're ready for a challenge, then this trailing floral template is for you. So let's get started. I'm using the Pattern Maker canvas here, with its seamless texture overlays and all the layers set up for you to build easy patterns. If you don't have the Pattern Maker canvas yet, you can still follow along with this tutorial. You'll just need to use a 12 by 12 inch canvas like this one at 300 dpi, and then on an empty layer you just need to draw yourself a diamond the same shape as this one, and it's really important that it goes off the edges in all directions. So you just need to draw a rough diamond like this, and then you can follow along with what we're doing. So there's already a diamond set up like this in the sketch folder on the sketch diamond layer, and we're going to start working on the draw here first layer, which is an empty layer above the diamond. So the first thing we need to do is bring our template in. This will go underneath the sketch diamond, so we're going to tap on this spare diamond layer underneath it, go to our canvas actions, add, insert a file or insert a photo wherever you have it saved. And then this is the template we're going to be using. So this template has all the stem, leaf and flower positions marked out for you, and all we have to do is trace over them. We're going to draw the ones in black. The ones in blue will be made by offsetting the ones in black, and then the pink ones here on the edges are going to go in our extra group. So I'm going to start working on my draw here first layer, which is an empty layer above the sketch diamond. And because I've got all of the stems in place with this document, I'm not going to bother resketching those, but if you wanted to alter the position of the stems, then you should also include these on your sketch layer. I'm just going to add in the flowers and the leaves. I always like to start off on an empty layer because it allows me to move things around a little bit before I merge it down with the diamond. So I'm going to start by stamping out some daisies, and I'm going to use this stylized floral set, which you can find in the Pattern Maker's Toolkit on my website. I'm going to add some 7 petal daisies, and I'm going to stamp these into the black circles here. So if you want to use the same stamp that I'm using here, you can find that in the Pattern Maker's Toolkit on my website, or of course you can just draw your own floral shapes in here. You don't have to use stamps. I just like to use these stamps when I'm working in my sketch layer just because it speeds things up. And then we'll add some smaller ones to these. So this one we wouldn't stamp any in because this is the blue layer, and that's going to be made by duplicating this one here. So it's just the black circles we're going to fill up first. And then once you've got your flower shapes stamped out, you can merge this layer down with your sketch diamond. So now we've got the diamond and the flowers all on one layer. Then I'm going to duplicate this layer, tap to transform, turn snapping and magnetics on, and I'm going to drag this halfway down and halfway across and snap it into this bottom corner here. You'll see those orange lines there, and you'll see all of these blue circles are now filled with these pink flowers. And then we're going to duplicate this bottom layer again and do the same into each of these corners. Each time we do this, we're looking out for those orange lines so that we know we're snapping it into the corners. Then we can pinch those top 4 layers together. So now we've got all of these outside ones on one layer and the inside ones on the other layer. I'm going to tap this layer and invert the colours so that we can see which ones are which now. So with this template, because we've got all of the stems and leaves marked out already, we can just go straight onto the illustrating now. So I'm going to open up my pattern folder, turn that on, and on this first layer here, I'm going to start by drawing the stems. So on this template, you'll notice there's a green stem here, and this one is the one that crosses both edges, and this is the part that makes it a trailing canvas. This line will just continue on endlessly. So this green one is the first one that we need to get in place. So I'll draw this in a nice bright pink so that you can easily see where I'm drawing here. I'm going to grab from my Pattern Maker's Canvas brush set, I'm going to use my tracing crayon, and I'm going to go into the settings, and I'm going to add a bit of stabilization on this as well, just to help me get a really nice smooth line with this. So I'm going to start up here underneath this flower and then come down to here where it crosses the line down there, following along with the green dotted line. There we go. And then this end of the line here, you'll see this shape here matches up with this. We actually need to join this line back up with itself in this corner. So what we're going to do is bring this down to here, like we did when we offset our sketch, so that we can then merge this line in. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to put a mark in each of these corners. I'm going to duplicate this layer, tap to transform, and then I'm going to snap this down here into the bottom corner. There we go, and you can see that's where they join up. So if I select the bottom layer, this one here, and I'm going to erase this line back a bit. Make sure I'm using a decent eraser first. And then I'm going to start drawing the line again, and then I can bring it in so it merges in perfectly with this one. There we go, so those lines are now perfectly joined up, and that's how you get the continual line going for your trailing floral. So now we can delete this top one that we made, and I think I'm going to tidy this line up a little bit actually. It's gone kind of thick there and then a little bit thinner, so I'm just going to tidy that up a bit and adjust the thickness on that. There we go. So once that line is in place, you've got your green line in, you can then go ahead and trace over all the other lines. I'm going to start by drawing all the flowers first, and then I'll go and add some stalks for the leaves. So then I'm going to use a slightly thinner brush and draw the stalks for the leaves in as well, remembering it's just the black ones we need to draw in. And you don't have to draw the stems on the leaves. If you don't tend to draw these stalks in your patterns, you could just, leave them to there. This is just how I draw my leaves when I'm drawing my patterns, so this is how I stylize it. These templates are always a starting point, and they're there for customizing. So for example, this leaf here, if you wanted to change it so it was 2 leaves, you could make one there, and you could make one there, and eventually have them branching off like that. So feel free to customize these templates and make them your own. So now I've got all my stems drawn in, I'm actually going to change these to the colour that I actually want them to be. So I'm going to alpha lock this layer and change the colour on those. Then I'm going to add a layer underneath, and I'm going to draw my leaves on this layer. So I'm going to grab this blue here, and I'm going to draw in the leaves where I've got these leaf markers. You can make these any shape leaf you want. You can just follow the basic leaf shape that I've put here. You could make them wavy leaves. You could make them kind of like oak leaves. As long as you stick within the basic leaf shape so that you know it's not going to overlap with any of the other leaves. I'm going to go and change the stabilization back down to 0 on my brush now, because I don't need it on for this part. Then I'm going to fill these with colour drop. Then I'm going to zoom in and fix this little halo that we get there around the edges when you're filling a shape that you've drawn with a texture brush. So we can easily fix all of the bits on one layer at the same time by duplicating this layer, coming up to our adjustments, going to Gaussian blur, and I'm going to put a Gaussian blur of 3% on there. Then I'm going to hide this layer, tap my select tool, I want it on automatic selection, and we're going to tap any of the negative space. Then we can adjust the threshold. You can see if we move from left to right, and we want it to, this edge here, to be kind of halfway between this gap and the outside of the leaf. Then we're going to invert our selection, tap to add a new layer, and then tap and fill that layer. We can delete the blurred layer, And then if I hide both of these and show them one at a time, you'll see we've got this inside shape here, which is the one we filled from the selection, which is slightly smaller than this layer underneath, which is our leaf. And that will fill all of those gaps all in one go, so you can then merge those two together. So the next thing I'm going to add is the middles for the flowers, and I'm going to do that on a layer above the stems. Make these orange. And I'm just going to go and draw around all of these circles like that. If you want a perfect circle, you can draw your circle shape, hold, tap with your finger, and then lift up, and you'll get a perfect circle shape. Or if you just want a kind of almost perfect but wobbly shape, you can just tap and hold, and it will snap to an ellipse. So those are all filled the same way as we did for the leaves. And then on a layer underneath these orange centers, I'm now going to add in the petals. So we'll add a layer underneath there and draw all these petals in. And while I'm here, I think I'm going to change the background to something so that we can see these a little better. So I'm going to change the background to this blue and then carry on drawing in all these petals. So that's all those petals drawn in and filled as per the way I showed you for the leaves. So the last part we have to illustrate, because all of these blue bits around the outside and the green flowers, they're going to be made by duplicating this around the outside. The last bit that we have to draw is this pink leaf coming off the end there. So to do that, we're going to put that in the extra folder. So I'm going to swipe down with 3 fingers to copy all. Then I'm going to come up to my extra folder and I'm going to swipe down with 3 fingers again, and I'm going to tap paste. So that's put a flattened copy of everything. It's suddenly got super textury because it copied it with the textures, and then we also have textures over the top. So I'll turn these off for this bit. And then we're going to duplicate this layer, tap to transform, and we're going to drag half of it and snap it to this edge, orange lines there. And then the other one, we're going to snap halfway over to this edge. So we can then merge those together, and you'll see your diamond should now be an X shape. And if you're using the Pattern Maker canvas, you'll see that you can zoom in here and see that those are all perfectly lined up. So now we can add a layer above this inserted image and just put these in as well. So I'm going to grab my blue color, my tracing crayon, and I'm just going to trace over and merge this leaf in with the stem down there. And then when we come to build this pattern out later, we'll put these leaves back onto the edges of the canvas and it will all make sense. I'm just going to trace over to fill in these gaps, as there's only 2 leaves here to do. So we could say we've finished all the illustrating now if we didn't want to add a little bit of shading and texture in, but I do think I want to put a little bit of shading in here. So I'm going to add a layer above my leaves, make it a clipping mask, and I'm going to change the blend mode to Colour Burn 40%. Then I'm going to grab a 50% grey colour by double tapping here, and using my, I think we'll use the gradient texture, I'm going to apply this to the leaves like that. And because we're using a Colour Burn blend mode, it's going to bring up the colours slightly darker and slightly more saturated. And the great thing about using Colour Burn for your shading is that if I alpha lock this layer and fill it with a different colour, for example this pink colour, you'll see that shading there will still blend down and match perfectly, and you only have to change the underneath colour. You don't have to change the colours on the blending layer. I'm just going to undo that now and add a bit of lightness on the edges of the leaves. I'm going to add another layer above this and it will get clipped in between those. I'm going to go back to this grey colour, and this one, because I want to add highlights, I need to use the colour Dodge, and we'll change it again 40%, and we'll just put a bit of that lighter colour onto the outsides of those leaves like that. So that's all of our illustrating done in the extra group, so we can collapse that one and hide that for now, and then go back and repeat all of that shading on our pattern layer. So I'll add those 2 layers above the leaves, the Colour Burn 40%, I'll duplicate that one and switch this one to Colour Dodge 40%, and then we're going to clip these 2 down over the leaves. and then we're going to repeat that shading over all these leaves. Then I'm going to repeat that shading over the orange middles. So make this one colour burn 40%. Make the other one colour dodge and clip them both down. And then on the colour burn layer, I'm just going to add a bit of shading to these middles. And then on the colour dodge layer, I'm just going to add a little touch of highlight there. And then for the petals, because colour burn and colour dodge don't have any effect on white, what I'm going to do is make them a really light version of this background colour here. So we will alpha lock the petals layer, and then I'm going to go to my colours, and using the classic palette I'm going to get an almost white version of this colour there, and then I'm going to fill that with that, so those are almost white but not quite, and then we can use that colour burn and colour dodge on this. So let's make this one colour burn 40, top one colour dodge, and then using the 50% grey again, we can add a bit of shading to these. So for the colour burn, I'm going to add a little bit of that coming out from underneath the petals. Because it's still almost white, it's a really subtle difference, but when we put the colour dodge on the outside, that will lighten it a lot more. And then on the colour dodge layer, we can add some of that to the edges, and you'll see that's making them a lot lighter on there, and that contrasts more against what's in the middle now. And then if I turn the textures on and zoom in, you can see that picks up a lot more of the texture there, so it's not just that flat white colour anymore. So now all our illustrating is done and we're ready to build out the rest of the pattern tile. So I'm going to hide my pattern marker, collapse my pattern group and turn off the sketch. I'm going to hide the background colour, and I'm going to swipe down with 3 fingers, tap copy all, come up here to layers, swipe down again and tap paste. So now we've got a flattened version of all that. You can also duplicate your pattern group and flatten that if you have plenty of layers free to do that. Now we can turn off the pattern group. I'll turn off this one temporarily, bring up our extra group again, and I'm going to delete the inserted image and the extra, swipe down with 3 fingers, copy all, swipe down again and paste. Now we can turn off our layers and just have the background colour on. So this we need to put to the sides where it is in our, turn the sketch on again. So we need to put this over to the sides where it's marked out here. So the way we do that is put that mark on the corners again. Make sure I've got a sensible brush. So just put a mark going off those 2 corners. Then you can duplicate this layer, drag it over to that side and snap it, and then snap this one over to that side. Then we can pinch those 2 together, turn off our layers, and I'll just erase these. So now we can turn this one back on, and you can see there that merges in nicely with that. So now we can merge these 2 together. So we've got our pattern group and our extra group flattened and all down in this one together. And then we're going to build out this tile now using the same method that we used to build out the sketch. So we're going to duplicate this and drag it into all of the corners. Making pattern tiles like this in Procreate is how I make all of my patterns these days for both personal and professional projects. This part though I normally do in Photoshop. I've got an automation set up to convert the pattern folder to a smart object and then automatically duplicate it around the canvas just like I am here. It's so quick and easy, and I can do it just by pressing one button. Using smart objects means you don't have to flatten anything, and you can edit a part of the pattern and it will update anywhere that that part is repeated. In terms of quality, it's absolutely fine to do that part here in Procreate, but if you want max speed and editability in your workflow, then Photoshop smart objects are definitely the way to go. And there we go, that is our finished pattern tile. Using this diamond repeat method means you get no gaps when you upload to Spoonflower, but before we save and export, it's always good to do a quick test right here in Procreate. So I'm going to turn my textures on now. I'm going to swipe down with 3 fingers to copy all. Come up here to the top, swipe down again, and I'm going to tap paste. Then underneath this layer, I'm going to add a layer of black. And then if there's any gaps or semi-transparent bits in the pattern, that black will show through and we'll be able to see if there's a problem. So this layer here, I'm going to tap to transform and I'm going to drag it up here to the middle. You'll see 1800 pixels there and orange lines. Then we can duplicate this, drag it over there and just zoom in and make sure that there's no problems on this seam here, no semi-transparent gaps, and that's all looking okay. So then we can pinch those two together, duplicate, and then we can drag that down there and just zoom in again and check there's nothing suspicious going on that line. And that's looking okay now, so we know this tile is ready to save as a JPEG and export, and we would just want to export this tile here, not the duplicated one. Don't forget you can get the stamp brushes and template when you join the Pattern Makers Toolkit. It's kind of like a Patreon group and it's free to join. You'll get access to all the resources in the Pattern Makers Toolkit on my website, including those I make for my Skillshare classes, early access to some of my YouTube tutorials and drawing prompts, discounts in my Etsy store, and one new freebie exclusively via email every month. Talking of my Etsy store, that's where you'll find the Pattern Maker canvas and brush set, as well as some premium trailing floral template sets just like the one we've used today. If you want to learn more about my Procreate to Photoshop workflow using automations and smart objects, you can find that on Skillshare. If you're new to Skillshare and you sign up using the link below, you'll get an extra 30 days for free. All the links for everything I've mentioned are in the description. Don't forget to tag me at Becky Flaherty if you share your patterns on Instagram so I don't miss them. And don't forget to subscribe here if you want to see more pattern tutorials like this every Wednesday. That's all from me today. Have fun, stay creative, and I will see you soon.